Good morning. It is Friday, June 24th, and it's a special edition of GMSA at 9. It's the girl show, full girl show.
That's right. Sarah, Steph, and you can't see her right now, but Katie's also here as well.
I also want to say featuring Stephen Cavazos, because he will be here.
Yes, we didn't forget about you.
We didn't, no. But it's an honor to be here with you, Steph.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about the roadways with Stephen, and also how we're going to get a little bit of relief next week with the temperatures. That'll be later, though.
I want to call it Female Friday, because when I used to work with Azzy and Bermia, one of our photographers, on Fridays, we called it Female Friday, and we would only listen to our favorite female artists.
Oh, that's a great way to celebrate Friday.
Yeah, Female Friday.
All right, well, let's look at today's 9 at 9 for now. For the first time in years, gun law reform appears to be happening in the U.S. As early as this morning, the U.S. House is expected to pass a bipartisan safety bill. This after the Senate approved its version late last night. The bill could be ready for the president's signature as early as this weekend. The legislation.
We're sorry about that technical difficulty. Hopefully we'll be able to bring you that as soon as we get all those bugs kinked out. We're going to take a look at live cam, though.
Yes,
we're going to head over to Katie Blake. Katie, 80 degrees right now, and unfortunately, probably another triple-digit day.
Yes. Yesterday was our 19th triple-digit day of the year, and today will likely be number 20. And probably 21 and 22 over the weekend. And then Monday, that's when we start to get a little bit of relief and things start to change. And I promise you, we will talk all about that coming up later on in this newscast. First, let's check on the pollen count for today. Rounding out the week with another very quiet pollen count. Only molds reported today. They're low with a count of 200. Currently near 80 out at the airport. Mostly sunny skies, what our sensor is reading. But as you saw on that shot of live cam, nothing but blue sky out there, and that's what I anticipate we'll see for the remainder of your Friday. So coming up, we'll talk all about the weekend. Triple-digit heat will continue, and we'll also talk about the rain chances that kick in early next week, the change in our weather pattern that will lead to these rain chances, and also managing expectations here, how much rain you can expect for your yard as we get into the early and middle part of next week. All that coming up here in just a little bit. I know it's been a very busy morning out on the roadways. Our traffic authority, Stephen Cavazos, has been very busy tracking several accidents, including one big one. Stephen, what's the latest?
You know, Katie, that cleared out, thankfully, over off 35 in Kohlenberg, north of New Braunfels. We've been talking about that for over an hour, but good news is that's in the clear. What we are seeing now is off 410 at Marbach along the frontage road. SAWS had a water main break overnight, and it lasted at least 15 hours, and you can see crews still out there. We're also seeing some water that's spouting out there on the frontage road. Hopefully everybody's okay in that direction and that work is getting done, but it is taking quite a while to see this. And our friends at TransGuide were able to get us that shot. This is along the frontage road, and we're going to start there. That is in the southbound lanes, not far from Marbach Road, the frontage road, that is. And then keep in mind, again, if you're traveling on 410 southbound, be prepared because Marbach Road is still closed. It's been that way for at least 15 hours now. We're going to have to watch it closely here on GMSA at 9. But as we get a wide view of the map, there's really not much else to talk about. Thankfully, we were seeing some issues, again, detected north of New Braunfels. That has cleared out. And right now, it's just some of those active construction spots. But back here on TransGuide, gosh, not sure what's going on there, but we'll find out and give you those updates coming up here on GMSA at 9. Steph, Sarah?
Thank you, Stephen. We begin with breaking news from the west side. San Antonio police reportedly have 2 people in custody after someone fired gunshots at an officer.
Yeah, so this is happening in the 1000 block of San Fernando and South Richter. That's near Tilipan Walk Street. Now, we're told officers were investigating a report of a stolen vehicle when they heard gunshots. When they went to go check it out, more gunshots rang out. So police say 2 people were seen running away. No one was hit, but a police vehicle and 2 other vehicles were hit by that gunfire. Officers are still investigating, and we'll have more on this breaking news story in our later newscasts.
And for now, let's look at today's 9 at 9. For the first time in years, gun law reform appears to be happening in the U.S. As early as this morning, the U.S. House is expected to pass a bipartisan safety bill. This after the Senate approved its version late last night. The bill could be ready for the president's signature as early as this weekend. The legislation will fund red flag laws, address mental health, background checks, and more.
Today marks 1 month since the deadly school shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, where 19 children and 2 teachers were killed when a gunman entered the school with an arsenal of weapons. It took law enforcement 77 minutes to enter the classroom to confront and kill the gunman.
The Supreme Court strikes down New York State's concealed carry law requirement. The law that's more than a century old required residents to prove they had a special need for a gun. By 6-3 majority, the Supreme Court declared that law violates the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. People who want to carry a concealed gun will still need a license as well as pass the background check, fingerprinting, and registration.
10 o'clock our time, Surfside City officials in Florida will hold a public memorial to honor the 98 victims of the Champlain Tower South collapse. Shortly before 1:30 in the morning on June 24th of 2021, witnesses heard a loud noise and saw a cloud of dust. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is expected to join family members of the victims at the memorial, marking the first anniversary of the tragedy.
A study out today says COVID-19 vaccines saved 19.8 million lives in the first year they were available. That modeling study published in The Lancet says the impact of the vaccination programs was determined by estimating the additional lives lost if there were no vaccines. The study also asserts that up to 600,000 more lives could have been saved if each country had been able to vaccinate 40% of their prospective populations by the end of 2021, as proposed by the World Health Organization.
25 years and 5 NBA championships later, the San Antonio Spurs are taking advantage of its top picks during last night's 2022 NBA draft. With their 9th pick, the Spurs selected Jeremy Sohan, a 19-year-old, 6'9" freshman forward out of Baylor. With the 20th overall pick, the Silver and Black called out 19-year-old Ohio State guard Malachi Brenham and Blake Wesley, another freshman guard from Notre Dame, to round out the top 3 picks in the first round for the Spurs.
More discouraging news for would-be homebuyers. Mortgage rates rising again this week. A 30-year loan inching up to 5.8%. The average 15-year rate rising to 4.9%. This after last week's huge rate jump, the largest in 35 years.
Government officials in Germany say it can't rule out the possibility of rationing gas. The comments were made Thursday during a press conference while discussing the disruption of the gas supply chain in Germany. They say it's necessary to declare this emergency gas plan to reduce gas consumption now during the summer as they look ahead towards winter. Right now, the supply is currently guaranteed, but officials want consumers to be aware rationing could be on the horizon.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly ordered a strengthening of the country's defense capabilities today as he wrapped up a key party meeting with top military officials. This comes amid concerns about North Korea conducting a potential nuclear test. In state media video, Kim and the North's top officials are seen in a meeting with a map of what appeared to be the east coast of the Korean peninsula, where South Korea's nuclear power plants are located. The nuclear test by South Korea now would be the first nuclear test in 5 years, and U.S. and South Korean officials say it could take place at any time now. And that's today's 9 at 9.
In your morning headlines, a wild scene inside a courtroom after a father attacks a defendant during a trial, and a Good Samaritan driver steps up to help some Texas police officers during a chase.
Plus, hundreds of teens throw an illegal house party inside an $8 million home, and wildlife officials reveal the largest snake ever seen in the Sunshine State. RJ Marquez joins us in the studio with all of those stories. Good morning.
Yeah, good Friday morning, guys. I feel like I'm part of the Cool Kids Club right here.
Yeah, so we can say featuring Stephen Cavazos and RJ Marquez.
Yeah, definitely. Well, appreciate you guys having me here. And of course, we're going to start there with that story you just mentioned, Sarah, this emotional and heated scene inside a Cincinnati courtroom. Look at this video behind me where you could see this father attack his son's accused killer. So Antonio Hughes is the name of the father. He lunged at the defendant named Deshaun Brown and punched him repeatedly in that courtroom. Officers, you can see right there, subdued Hughes, but he went after Brown again once he was back on his feet, and he was removed from the court and charged with contempt and ordered to serve 7 days in jail. Hughes was the father of 3-year-old Nilo Lattimore. Prosecutors say that back in 2020, Brown murdered Nilo's mother and put the child into a river. Well, while he was still alive. The boy's body was never found. So the boy's mother is named Nitisha Lattimore. She was Brown's girlfriend at the time, and if found guilty, Deshaun Brown faces the death penalty. But a very heated and emotional scene right there. All right, back here closer to home, a Texas Police Department is thanking a man who helped out during an officer foot chase on Saturday, and it was all caught on the officer's body cam. So over the weekend, 2 officers near Fort Worth got into this foot chase. You can see this body cam video with the suspect who took off after officers tried pulling him over for driving a stolen car. But during the chase, one of the officers starts to get tired in the heat. We know we had 100-degree heat here, while the other stays on the suspect's tail. But that's when Jimmy Davis, this is an ex-security guard, pulled up in a blue sedan. You can see the officer getting in right there. The Good Samaritan saw the chase happening and offered a ride. So the officer tells Davis where to go and catches up with the fellow other officer named Samuel Brown, who's just about to arrest that suspect.
I said, sir, so would you want to ride? He goes, yeah, man, let me get in at the right place at the right time to help an officer.
Well, I think he said something like taxi services here or something like that. You could probably hear it in the video.
Yeah, gotta definitely have a sense of humor for those types of things. So this suspect right here, 31-year-old Joshua Brown, has been charged with 3 felonies. Police said that stolen vehicle was returned to its owner. Pretty good timing there for that Good Samaritan. Okay, guys, now to Florida, where the owners of an $8 million vacation home are picking up the pieces today after an illegal house party over the weekend. So get this, hundreds of teenagers broke in and threw the party while the owners were out of town. So the owners left on Wednesday with plans to return on Sunday, but sheriffs there said that the party had been advertised on social media since Monday. Information the sheriff's office was gathering, they were getting through flyers and videos posted on social media. So they tell us that there were more than 200 kids at the party when deputies arrived to break it up.
This had been advertised for an entire week. So that's going to be part of our process, is figuring out how they knew the house would be empty and where that information came from. But at the end of the day, they knew that they did not have permission to be there. The house was broken into. I just would encourage the kids who are there to come forward now.
Yeah, that just looks like a crazy scene there. You can see they're having like boxing matches inside one of the rooms. So to make matters worse, the house was actually up for sale. So the owners now saying that they will move forward with pressing every civil and criminal charge possible against everyone involved. Yeah, crazy scene there. Okay, this is crazy. Also out of Florida, biologists caught the biggest Burmese python ever, found in the Everglades. Check this python out. I mean, this thing's just freaking me out just looking at it right here. So this thing is almost 18 feet long and it weighed 215 pounds. It was a female loaded with 122 eggs. So get this, this is the largest snake ever caught in the state of Florida, but this actually happened back in the winter. So biologists say that they used a smaller male snake fitted with a transmitter, which led to this massive female snake. And it took 3 people in the middle of the swamp, look at them pulling this thing out, to carry the massive reptile back. And what was in this snake was also very interesting. Besides the eggs, biologists there found bobcat claws, showing just how these animals have worked their way up to get larger prey as they continue to grow. So the invasive python was actually put down after it was caught in a procedure approved by wildlife officials. So since 2013, guys, conservancy officials there have removed more than 1,000 pythons from that area, which apparently are an invasive species. Okay. Something like this, yeah, is pretty scary.
So they aren't even, they're invasive, they're not native to that area,
Yes.
and it's just people dumping their pet snakes.
Yeah, they say that over the past 10 years, there's been this like explosion of Burmese pythons. This one's the largest ever recorded in history. But yeah, anyone with a fear of snakes, I'm like, nope, I'm out.
No.
Well,
Done.
that kind at least. I mean, it took down a
I mean,
bobcat.
it took a bobcat down. It could probably
took a bobcat
it can
down,
definitely
exactly.
take me down.
Yes.
Thank you, RJ.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Time now, 9:12 and 81 degrees for now.
Still ahead on GMSA at 9.
Coming up next, a mural that has been in the West Side since 1998 gets a facelift. Details on who's behind this project and what it means to the community.
We have some breaking news. Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, ending 50 years of federal abortion rights.
Let's go ahead and check in with this ABC special report.
Just because something might not have been a constitutional right when the Constitution was written in 1787, perhaps the generalities in the Constitution can be read to guarantee these rights to people marrying people of the same sex, to constitutional right to choose abortion. Contraception isn't mentioned in the Constitution either. It does seem that this opinion opens the door not just to overruling Roe versus Wade, but to other rights that many Americans have taken for granted that are based on the same reasoning, that the Constitution can evolve.
Terry Moran, stay with us here. You're watching ABC News live coverage this morning of the Supreme Court's historic ruling this morning, overruling Roe versus Wade in this country. It will have a profound impact on abortion rights in America, in this country. In fact, as you heard Terry mention moments ago, the impact will be felt almost immediately. In 13 states, they have what are called trigger laws, which means it would take any abortion rights off the books as they currently stand. 26 states in totality could actually change their laws almost immediately. There you can see the map on the screen there. Those are the states expected to ban or severely restrict abortion rights almost immediately. I want to bring in Rachel Scott, our congressional correspondent. She's live outside the Supreme Court where people are already demonstrating this morning. Rachel, what's the reaction down there?
David, this is a seismic shift. People from all over the country gathering here today, and take a look at the reaction. We have seen tears of sadness, tears of happiness from people on both sides of the issue today. And take a look, as I want to bring you into the fencing that has been up here around the Supreme Court since that leak draft came out. This fence wraps out around the entire Supreme Court complex because they have been preparing for this moment. David, I've been covering this issue for over a year. I've been traveling to many states, speaking with Republicans that have been trying to restrict abortion, talking to them that have had to travel hundreds of miles to get an abortion. This is a new reality for women in this country, David.
Rachel Scott, obviously reaction coming in already, and reaction on both sides of this issue in this country. We'll go back to Rachel when we can hear her a little more clearly, obviously being drowned out by the immediate reaction at the court. I want to bring in Kate Shaw, our Supreme Court contributor, legal scholar. And Kate, what do you make of the decision? What stands out to you?
You know, this is one of the most important decisions the Supreme Court has handed down in this century, certainly in the past half century, but it'll stand with among the most important decisions of the Supreme Court. Look, for nearly half a century, Americans, women, but all Americans, have structured their lives and made their choices with the sort of understanding that if contraception should fail, they have abortion, a constitutionally protected right to terminate a pregnancy, essentially as a backstop. Justice Stephen Breyer, who wrote the dissent for himself, plus Justice Elena Kagan and Justice Sonia Sotomayor, basically writes that the state can control a woman's body and a woman's destiny by taking from her the choice to continue with or to terminate a pregnancy. And I think this will have seismic impact on women's lives and on the choices they can make and really on the course of the country. So it's an enormously consequential decision. And Justice Alito says that it doesn't call into question any of the court's other precedents on things like contraception or same-sex marriage. But the dissent, I think, rightly points out that the logic of the majority opinion very much calls those cases into question, whatever the majority says in insisting that it does not call those rights into question.
Kate, let me ask you, because you point out in the dissenting opinion there states can control a woman's body and destiny. Bottom line, in those 26 states we were just looking at, obviously 13 of them have the trigger laws. Bottom line here, what does the future look like for women in those states if they were going to get an abortion?
Well, as of today, in many states, these trigger laws will go immediately into effect. And in other states, there are laws that have been struck down by courts because they were inconsistent with Roe. And those decisions will no longer be enforceable. And so those laws will come back into effect in many instances. And in several other states, it's clear, because political leaders have said they're going to again pass laws to criminalize or prohibit abortion in all or nearly all instances. And so, those women will either seek to travel to other states if they want to terminate a pregnancy or continue with unwanted pregnancy. And some states have also indicated they're going to move to make it difficult to leave the state to obtain abortion care elsewhere. So, in no way does this decision end the roiling national debate about abortion. In some ways, I think it's going to kick it into higher gear as we see states begin to respond.
Kate Shaw describing a time we haven't seen in this country in 50 years, a situation where women in this country will have to travel across state lines if they're looking to have an abortion, if they're in one of these states that will have a trigger law that goes into effect immediately. In fact, there are 13 of those, 26 in total, that plan to take action almost immediately. So in 26 states in this country, if a woman seeks to get an abortion, will most likely have to travel outside that state to find the opportunity to make that decision on her own. I want to bring in Devin Dwyer, who covers the Supreme Court for us. And Devin, this country knows very well these Supreme Court confirmation hearings, and every time there is a justice who comes before the American people and the Senate, of course, to answer questions, they're always asked about this issue. They're very careful with their answers, but almost always we hear about precedent in this country and respect for precedent, and this law was on the books for 50 years. So what are Americans to make of the answers they heard from some of these justices before?
There's been a lot of attention, David, on those statements and at least the confirmation hearings of the three most recent justices appointed by Donald Trump. Remember, with the express purpose, goal of overturning Roe versus Wade, which they've now accomplished. And during those confirmation hearings, they were asked, will you stand by Roe versus Wade as established precedent? Stare decisis is the doctrine of the Supreme Court. Let decisions stand. And today we saw in a concurrence from Justice Brett Kavanaugh, he said that stare decisis is not absolute. The conservatives today, David, making clear that they have a more expansive, flexible view of stare decisis. And Justice Alito saying that in cases where decisions are egregiously wrong, the court must act. They did that in Plessy versus Ferguson with that separate but equal doctrine way back, Brown versus Board, overturning segregation in schools in the 50s. Today, this conservative majority making clear they're doing just that, correcting a wrong in their view, David.
Devin Dwyer, who's with us here this morning, covers the court for us. Devin, stay with us here. We'll certainly come back to you before the morning is done, our coverage here this morning. Stephanie Ramos is in Mississippi. She's at the clinic that was at the center of this case, testing the future of Roe versus Wade in this country. And Stephanie, what's the scene there?
Well, David, as you could hear, there are some anti-abortion rights activists on a loudspeaker behind me, but you're exactly right. This is the clinic at the heart of the case. It's the only abortion clinic left in the state of Mississippi. It is run by the Jackson Women's Health Organization. It's also known as the Pink House. As you can see, it's a pink building here situated on the corner. Also on the corner, anti-abortion rights activists who are here to persuade women not to get an abortion. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, David. Families have depended on this clinic. Women have relied on this clinic year after year. A recent estimate showed more than 2,500 women received an abortion here in a year in the state of Mississippi. Now, if this clinic closes, it could have severe impact on the lowest income communities. Keep in mind, here, Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the nation. Now that Roe has fallen, as you mentioned, some 26 states could ban or severely restrict abortions. That's including Mississippi. And we know that women have traveled here from other states like Texas and Oklahoma. They have already set some of these bans in place, but now those women and women here in Mississippi may not have an option to visit this clinic, David.
Stephanie Ramos in Mississippi at the clinic at the center of this case. I want to bring in Carrie Severino. She's the president of Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization. And Carrie, I know this is considered a major victory for you and the people that you work with who have been working for 50 years to get Roe overturned.
Absolutely, but most importantly, because this is a return to what the Constitution simply says, and I think that's what the majority opinion is very clear about, is the Constitution nowhere provides the right to abortion. That's something that some states may choose to do, but that's not something that's in the federal Constitution, and the Supreme Court has to limit itself to deciding cases on the cases based on the Constitution itself. So this will put that issue back in the hands of our elected representatives. That's where it was for most of American history, and I think that that's where the Constitution leaves it, and so that's the correct result today.
I wanted to ask you, Carrie, about the most recent polling. I know that you're aware of it from the Pew Research Center, also from Quinnipiac just in the last couple of days. that 61% of Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. What do you make of those numbers and the fact that this ruling would appear to go against what the majority of Americans are hoping for, asking for?
It doesn't in any way contradict that. I mean, what this is saying is, yes, if you would like to make abortion legal in all or most circumstances, now you have the ability to do that at the legislative level. That's something that Americans, again, always until 1973, had the ability to legislate on this issue. It's simply not in the Constitution. So the Supreme Court's job is not to look at opinion polls and say, well, what do people want? Let's come up with laws that reflect what people want. No, their job is to simply interpret the Constitution and interpret the laws that are actually passed by Congress and passed by our elected representatives. So if most Americans want to see that, that's what we will see, but we'll see it in a legislative way rather than judges usurping that legislative power.
Carrie Severino, president of Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization that has worked to see this day come true. She says this decision is rooted in the Constitution, that this should be at the state level where this decision is made, and that's what she believes the court has decided here today. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. I want to bring Terry Moran back in because Chief Justice John Roberts did weigh in on this decision. You've had more time to pour through this. What have you found, Terry?
Well, David, this case has 5 conservative justices voting to overrule Roe versus Wade. It has 3 liberal justices opposing that, and it has John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, in the middle. He says that he would have validated the Mississippi law at issue here. Mississippi passed a law banning almost all abortions at 15 weeks. He says that's all you have to decide. You don't have to decide that a woman no longer has a constitutional right to an abortion. And he says we should adhere closely to the principles of judicial restraint here instead of, quote, repudiating a constitutional right we have not only previously recognized, but also expressly reaffirmed. He says that the court is too full of certainty on this issue, and he would wait for the next case to come. He's lost control of this court, but it is significant that a justice as conservative as John Roberts is looks at what his conservative colleagues did and says that that's judicial activism.
Very interesting, Terry, that the Chief Justice was appearing to write that there could have been some sort of meeting in the middle here, some sort of a compromise. As Terry points out, 5 conservative justices, majority opinion, 3 liberals, and then there was the Chief Justice John Roberts, who said we could validate what Mississippi is asking for, and that's all we have to do. And Terry, one more question before we move on and ask about the White House reaction, what the president might do. We have Dr. Jen Ashton standing by as well. But Terry, one more question for you, because Justice Breyer, in his dissent, talks about the court, how the court will be viewed in this country. And I bring this up because you just talked about the Chief Justice losing control of the court, in so many words, what you just said. Justice Breyer writes that one of us once said that it is not often in the law that so few have so quickly changed so much. For all of us in our time on this court, that has never been more true than today. In overruling Roe and Casey, this court betrays its guiding principles. With sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. He talks about the court betraying its guiding principles, that there has been such swift change on the court.
And that, David, is what justices are always concerned about, because the power of the Supreme Court comes from the confidence and trust of the people. That is why people respect its opinions. And if its decisions shift because one political party gets to appoint some justices, that erodes confidence. This is bedrock belief of justices throughout our history, that they should abide by the law and the canons of judicial conduct in a way that doesn't seem to communicate to people that they're just another political institution. And what Justice Breyer is saying there explicitly, and what Chief Justice John Roberts is suggesting, is that this is an activist decision. This is a decision that did not have to be made. And that, given the nature of the issue and how it has been brought to the court, will suggest that this is a court not of judges, but of politicians in judges' robes. That is the danger that Justice Stephen Breyer is alerting the country to.
All right, Terry Moran, stay with us here. We'll continue our coverage here this morning. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, because, Cecilia, this White House knew since the leaked opinion that this very well could happen. What action have they been planning behind the scenes, if any at all?
Yeah, and David, they have been holding a number of emergency meetings behind closed doors in the weeks since that leaked draft opinion came out, certainly preparing for what has happened here today. And the White House has said all along that they would be ready when and if this time came, but they have played it very close to the vest in terms of what these options are. I will just tell you, we have not heard an official reaction from anybody in the higher levels of the administration, certainly not from the president. He doesn't have anything on his public schedule today. He is getting ready to head overseas for a foreign trip to Europe, but certainly this decision will impact and overshadow so much of this trips to come. The president has asked the Gender Policy Council for what advice on what to do. The White House Council has been weighing legal decisions and moves that the president could make. Lawmakers, advocacy groups have been pitching in these closed-door meetings. So you can see right here on the screen next to me some of the options that are on the table. This is a very broad range, and frankly, we're doing a little tea leaf reading here because they haven't signaled exactly what they will do. We're talking about potentially declaring a public health emergency. They could sue states for being at odds with FDA policy. They could allow abortion pills to be provided at pharmacies. They could ease restrictions on the imports of abortion pills into this country. And there is this one. They could lease federal buildings to abortion providers. The thinking there is perhaps some of those sites are out of jurisdiction of some of these states where the procedure is now banned. But look, David, advocates have told us all along, and certainly even people inside the White House will tell you privately, this is not something the president can executive order, can executive action his way out of, no matter what the president decides to do. If he does decide to go the executive action route, that is not going to overturn this ruling. The president has been lobbying, frankly, the White House has been asking and hopeful that Congress would codify Roe into law. They do not have the votes. The Democrats do not have the votes. Republicans certainly have not wanted that to happen, and there's no expectation that they will after this. But all eyes, particularly from the left and liberals and progressives in this country, are on this White House starting today, starting this minute, to see what they will do to help women in this situation.
Cecilia Vega, our thanks to you on the potential options, though they are limited for sure, that the White House can take, the potential steps that the president might try to take. But again, the road is very limited because, again, you have just witnessed here on our coverage the Supreme Court ruling to overturn Roe versus Wade, allowing states to ban abortions across this country. We have mentioned the numbers before, but if you're just joining us, that means 13 states with so-called trigger laws can move to ban abortions immediately. 26 states in all planning to take action very swiftly. We heard from the president of the Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative organization, Carrie Severino, who said this is what we have been working for 50 years in this country, and she made the case that this should be back to the states. That's where the decision-making on this particular issue should take place. We will, of course, hear the other side of this as we continue our coverage here this morning. I want to bring in former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who's with us here this morning. Heidi, obviously you come in on the other side of this issue. An extraordinary morning, an historic morning, 50 years of precedent in this country overturned. What's your reaction?
My first reaction is, who is this going to hurt the most? It's going to hurt low-income women who seek abortion mainly for economic reasons, and they can't afford to get on a plane. Once again, the difference between the services that can be provided to rich people in this country and poor people in this country have taken a huge impact today. But more importantly, this is the first time in my history that the Supreme Court has taken a step backward on individual rights. And it is absolutely amazing to me that one president, Donald Trump, can basically override the will of literally millions of people in this country who believe that this procedure should be available and safe for women across the country. There's nothing about this decision that doesn't further divide our country. And by that, I mean, now all of a sudden, we're going to see huge divisions between those red states that state legislators have basically enacted trigger laws. You're going to huge differences in blue states making abortion available and safe for women. And once again, young women who grow up in a state like mine are going to say, if you can't recognize my right of privacy, I'm not going to live in your state. And so this has huge ramifications for the social fabric and the political fabric of our country. Probably what everybody's going to be analyzing is how will this affect the midterms? You know, for years we always said one issue voters have really driven this issue. But now, is this going to be a one-issue vote that people on the other side take, and are we going to see implications in the midterms as a result of this decision?
Former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, ABC News contributor, talking about the divisions between red states and blue states in this country only deepening, she believes, because of this particular issue and now this decision coming down from the Supreme Court, overturning Roe versus Wade this morning. 50 years of precedent in this country, sending it back to the states. And we already know that some 26 states plan to take action, if not immediately, in the very near future, to overturn abortion rights in their particular states. One state where that is not the case is obviously Connecticut, where the governor, Ned Lamont, in May signed the first in the nation reproductive rights legislation. Governor, first of all, your reaction to the court this morning and what this means, in particular for the women in your state, and why you took action in recent weeks.
I'm shocked that 50 years of precedent is being overturned by this court. The idea that politicians can stand between a woman and her doctor and let them make the right choice, and I can guarantee you it's not going to happen here in Connecticut. We're going to respect Roe v. Wade. We've got, by law, Roe v. Wade continues despite what the federal government does. And if there are any women who feel like their rights are being abused in other states, they're welcome here in Connecticut.
And Governor, of course, you're only the governor of Connecticut. You don't have any say over surrounding states or, for that matter, states across this country. What do you make of what you just heard from the former Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who said this is only going to deepen divisions across this country when you have some 26 states planning to take action and a return to the time when women who are seeking an abortion will very likely, if they can afford it, have to travel across state lines in this country to exercise that right?
I agree with her. I think you're going to find people voting with their feet. I think women and companies may decide, I want to go to a state that respects my rights, my right to choose, and Connecticut will be one of those states. And if you're somebody coming from Texas where they have vigilante justice and they try and enforce it against the doctor and the woman if she goes out of state, we're not going to let it happen here in Connecticut. We're going to protect those women that come into our state, and we're going to prosecute right back.
Both sides reacting very quickly this morning. Governor Ned Lamont echoing what we heard from former Senator Heidi Heitkamp this morning, describing a country where women will have to go across state lines to exercise their right. Of course, we heard from Judicial Crisis Network on the other side this morning saying that they believe 50 years in this fight has finally brought victory for them from the Supreme Court in returning this to the states to make this decision, that state lawmakers at the local level should decide the future of these rights. I want to bring in our chief medical correspondent and, of course, a board-certified OBGYN, Dr. Jen Ashton, tracking this with us here this morning. And again, Jen, you know I always ask these questions. What's the bottom line for women watching at home this morning? What are their options, and where does that stand in the country right now if this is a situation that you're facing or you fear you could face at some point in the future?
Well, first of all, David, I think not only board-certified OBGYNs, but certified nurse midwives and nurse practitioners and physicians' assistants, everyone in the medical profession who has dedicated their lives to taking care of women, are concerned. But we remain committed medically to providing safe reproductive health care to women. And I want to be clear, this is not just a women's health issue. This affects men in these women's lives, their fathers, their sons, their partners. And reproductive health is not just women's health, it's human health. So I think that what's important right now for women to know is, there will always be options, medical options, surgical options. The key is protecting 2 lives when a woman is pregnant, not just the life of the woman and the mother carrying that fetus, but the fetus as well. And there are medical conditions that literally put both of those lives at stake. Obviously, there are a plethora of other issues involved when we talk about abortion, but medically, this is literally oftentimes a life or death issue. And I think that the healthcare professionals who were there yesterday will be there today and tomorrow to help these women.
And if you're a woman in one of these 13 states with a trigger law, Dr. Jen, that goes into effect almost immediately banning abortion, what are the options medically?
Well, first of all, it's not one size fits all, David. It depends on the health of that woman. It depends on the gestational age, how far along she is in that pregnancy, which oftentimes is difficult to ascertain. Medication abortions are FDA approved up until 10 weeks, that's 70 days. Again, that's not always a fact that can be known for sure. And there are options to prevent unintended pregnancy. Most people confuse the two, that so-called Plan B, which people may have heard of as the morning after pill. That does not cause a termination or an abortion. That is taken after intercourse to prevent an unintended or undesired pregnancy. It's not 100% effective, but usually it's in the high 90s. The earlier it's taken, the better. Then when you talk about options for medication abortions, this will terminate a pregnancy and cause the evacuation of any contents of the uterus. These are given usually orally with 2 medications that are FDA approved, and again, up until about 10 weeks. So time is not always on the side of the woman from a medical standpoint. Oftentimes, in cases of a fetal anomaly, that's not diagnosed until 21 or 22 weeks. So that's where you get that 1% of abortions occurring after 21 weeks, oftentimes because it's not diagnosed before then. It is important to remember also, David, that over 90% of pregnancies of abortions occur in the first trimester. So that's really when time matters.
Dr. Jen Ashton, we really appreciate your insight here this morning, board-certified OBGYN, and of course our chief medical correspondent, on reaction within the medical community that will have to react swiftly because of the impact this is having on what perhaps they might be able to or not be able to do in some of these states moving forward. Dr. Jen, our thanks to you. We're getting reaction on both sides of the political aisle, Democrats and Republicans. Former President Obama issuing a statement just moments ago saying today the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, it relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the whims of politicians and ideologues attacking the essential freedoms of millions of Americans. That tweet sent out by former President Barack Obama just moments ago. On the other side, there was a statement this morning from former Vice President Mike Pence, who said today life won. By overturning Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court of the United States has given the American people a new beginning for life, and I commend the justices and the majority for having the courage of their convictions. I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. I loathe to talk about the politics of it all because we're talking about women's lives here. And as Jen pointed out, it's not just the woman's life, it's the ripple effect on the entire family, the unit surrounding that woman as well. But the politics are major in this case. And given these 2 statements, in particular from Mike Pence moments ago, this is something former President Trump and Mike Pence campaigned on going into that election. And then when given the chance, they did appoint, former President Trump did appoint justices who he believed, if the opportunity occurred, would overturn Roe versus Wade. And that's what we've seen here this morning.
And it's a simple fact, David, that without those 3 Trump-nominated justices, this decision would not have come down this way. What's significant in the statement by Mike Pence, because I think you'll see a lot more of this, is what he says happens next. He says, it is incumbent on all who cherish the sanctity of life to resolve that we will take the defense of the unborn and the support of women in crisis pregnancy centers to every state in America. And then he says this: we must rest and must not relent until the sanctity of life is restored to the center of American law in every state on the land. Here's the truth about Roe v. Wade. For all of these years, Roe v. Wade has kept this issue. It's always been, abortion's been a wedge issue. It's been a divisive issue, but it has been relegated to not the center of American politics, because there was a sense that no matter what politicians did, there was a constitutional right to an abortion. Now that's gone. So now you see this in every race, at the state level, at the federal level. The question will be asked, where do you stand on abortion rights? And now you see, one of the leading Republican figures, the former Republican vice president, being the first to come out and say there should be a movement across the entirety of the United States to ban abortion. That's not a position that every Republican holds by any measure, but now this issue becomes much more front and center in our politics, and will be right up there as one of the top 1, 2, or 3 issues in the midterm elections.
And John Carl, as you say, it's a fact. The 3 justices appointed by former President Trump, that decision-making allowed then this to happen. And I think in recent times, people will look back to the 2016 election, no matter what side of this issue you're on, and recognizing that that was a significant turning point for the future of Roe versus Wade.
No question at all. And if you look at the polling going into the 2016 election, abortion was not one of the top issues. Abortion is an issue that people long have had strong views about, but wasn't necessarily an issue that people would vote on. Certainly not a majority of people on either side of the issue. Now, there's an all-out political fight, not just about supporting justices who may or may not rule one way on a decision, but about whether or not abortion remains legal.
John Carl, our thanks to you this morning. Stay with us here. Our coverage continues. And you heard Terry Moran talking earlier about the Chief Justice John Roberts on the Supreme Court. And we've been able to take more time to read this decision today, and what the Chief Justice actually wrote attached to this decision. Obviously, this was written by Samuel Alito, 5 of the conservative justices signing on with Alito, but then Chief Justice John Roberts wrote this separately from that. He said, none of this, however, requires that we also take the dramatic step of altogether eliminating the abortion right first recognized in Roe. Mississippi itself previously argued as much to this court in this litigation when the state petitioned for our review. Its basic request was straightforward: clarify whether abortion prohibitions before viability are always unconstitutional. So again, the bottom line in what I've just read to you is that the Chief Justice said we are not required to take the dramatic step altogether of eliminating the abortion right first recognized in Roe. Which of course is what the conservative justices have gone ahead and done here this morning. An historic morning in this country, no matter what side of the issue you stand on. Roe versus Wade overturned, handing legislation back to the states, the decision-making back to the states. We know this will almost immediately have impact on the women in 26 states, 13 of which have what are called trigger laws, which automatically kick in and ban abortion rights in those states. Carol Tobias, the president of the National Right to Life Group, with us here this morning. And Carol, your reaction here this morning?
I'm ecstatic. The Supreme Court has correctly decided that the right to kill unborn children is not in the U.S. Constitution. This is a great day for unborn children and their mothers.
What do you make of the Chief Justice? You heard me, Carol, mention just moments ago what Chief Justice John Roberts, a conservative, wrote, essentially saying we don't need to take the, quote, dramatic step of altogether eliminating the abortion right first recognized in Roe, suggesting that there could have been some sort of compromise. Your reaction to the Chief Justice?
I'm not sure what compromise he would have come up with that would not result in the deaths of many, many preborn babies. I think the court was correctly decided, and I'm very appreciative for the 5 justices who had the courage to say this court was wrong in 1973.
Carol, I know this has been a fight for many of you for 50 years since Roe versus Wade became the law in the land. What do you make of the polling? How do you explain the polling from Quinnipiac just this week, not long ago from Pew Research, that shows more than 60% of Americans do believe that a woman should have the right to an abortion in this country?
I think the interesting information is when you start getting down into the details. Many people would support abortion in some cases, but they certainly do not support the way it is practiced now, abortion legal for any reason for all 9 months of pregnancy. That does not have widespread support, and what the court decision now does is let the people, through their elected representatives, decide what the law should be. And this is a great opportunity for people to start having those conversations. What should the law be? And, where do we want to go? If you don't like the way something is going in the direction in your state, then people have a right certainly to stand up and work for something else.
Carol Tobias, president of the National Right to Life group. Carol, I know this has been a fight of yours for some time, and we do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here this morning. Again, very mixed reaction coming in. Carol Tobias just telling us that she is ecstatic with this decision. It's something that she has been fighting along with the people on her team for quite some time in this country. Again, this is a very polarizing issue in this country. You don't need me to tell you that, and we're getting reaction from the other side. For example, the statement from Alexis McGill Johnson, president of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, just sending out a statement moments ago saying, knowing this moment would come does not make it any less devastating. The Supreme Court has now officially given politicians permission to control what we do with our bodies, deciding that we can no longer be trusted to determine the course for our own lives. That's the reaction coming in from Planned Parenthood, the Action Fund, here this morning. I want to bring back in Cecilia Vega because, Cecilia, I know we're expecting to hear from the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at any moment now. Any word from the White House?
There's no point in saying good morning because it certainly is not one. This morning, the radical Supreme Court is eviscerating Americans' rights and endangering their health and safety. But the Congress will continue to act to overcome this extremism and protect the American people. Today, the Republican-controlled Supreme Court has achieved their dark, extreme goal of ripping away a woman's right to make their own reproductive health decisions. Because of Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and the Republican Party, their supermajority in the Supreme Court, American women today have less freedom than their mothers. With Roe and their attempt to destroy it, radical Republicans are charging ahead with their crusade to criminalize health freedom. In the Congress, be aware of this, the Republicans are plotting a nationwide abortion ban. They cannot be allowed to have a majority in the Congress to do that. But that's their goal. And if you read, and again, we're all studying all this, but if you read what is in the very clear, one of the justices had his own statement. It's about contraception, in vitro fertilization, family planning. That is all what will spring from their decision that they made today. It's such a contradiction. Yesterday, they say the states cannot make laws governing the constitutional right to bear arms. And today, they're saying the exact reverse, that the states can overturn a constitutional right for 50 years, a constitutional right for a woman having the right to choose. The hypocrisy is raging, but the harm is endless. What this means to women is such an insult. It's a slap in the face to women about using their own judgment to make their own decisions about their reproductive freedom. And again, it goes well. I always have said the termination of a pregnancy is just their opening act. It's just their front game. But behind it, and for years, I have seen in this Congress opposition to any family planning, domestic or global, when we have had those discussions and those debates and those votes on the floor of the House. This is deadly serious, but we are not going to let this pass. A woman's right to choose reproductive freedom is on the ballot in November. We cannot allow them to take charge so that they can institute their goal, which is to criminalize reproductive freedom, to criminalize it. Right now, they're saying in states that they can arrest doctors and all the rest. What is happening here? What is happening here? A woman's fundamental health decisions are her own to make in consultation with her doctor, her faith, her family, not some right-wing politicians